Welcome back to Tartan Lullaby. I'm Archie, and tonight we have a long, quiet story for you. Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Find your pillow. Soften your shoulders. Let the day go. Tartan Lullaby tells slow stories of Scotland. Real places, real years, real people, told gently enough to fall asleep inside. There is no music tonight, no sudden noises, no need to follow every word. If you drift off in chapter 2, the rest of the story will play on quietly without you. That is how it is meant to be. If these stories help you settle, the like button and the bell tell the algorithm to bring them to other people who need them too. Tartan Lullaby is supported by listener purchases through the links below the video, which is how the channel keeps going. When you are ready, we will begin. Welcome, settle in wherever you are. Tonight, we are going to walk through a single autumn day on the harbour of Aberdeen in the year 1893. 11 chapters, from the pre-dawn lamps in the small square at Footdy, out along the basins where the steam trawlers lie at their moorings, through the fish market and the curing yards, up across the bridge to Torry, and back slowly into the quiet harbour night, with the lighthouse on the south pier turning its long, slow beam. There is no story to follow, only a working town in the northeast of Scotland doing what it has done for a very long time. Let your shoulders drop. There is nowhere else to be. It is 4:30 in the morning, on a still cool autumn day in or around the middle of October in the year 1893. The town of Aberdeen is mostly asleep. The grey granite streets of the upper town, away on the slope above us, are dark and silent, with only the occasional lamp burning at a junction. The trams are not yet moving. The mills are not yet stirring. But down here, at the very edge of the city, on the low flat ground where the river meets the sea, a small village is already awake. We are standing in the square at Footdy. The locals, by long custom, do not say Footdy in the way the spelling might suggest. They say it as Fitty, with a short, clean vowel and a soft T, and they have said it that way for as long as anyone in the village can remember. The village itself sits at the very foot of the Dee, where the river broadens at last into its harbour mouth, and it has been a fishing settlement on this same patch of ground for hundreds of years. The houses we are standing among are not the older ones. Those were swept away in the early 1800s. These cottages, by various accounts, were built between 1809 and 1840, in a series of plain low rows arranged around two small squares, North Square and South Square, with a third row added later. We are in North Square now. The cottages around us are single-story, hulled in pale rough plaster, with small windows set deep into thick walls and steep slate roofs that catch the lamplight. Every house has its own small stone outhouse, called by the people here a tarry shed, where the fishermen store their gear, their long lines, their oilskins, and the small stoves on which they heat the pitch for the tarring of their nets. The squares were built, in the old town plan, to put doors facing inward, so that the wind from the harbour could be broken before it reached the kitchens. Tonight that planning is doing its quiet work. The wind off the basin is fresh, cool, salt-flavoured, but inside the square it is gentle, almost still. The lamps in the windows are the lamps of households waking. They are not bright. They are the soft yellow light of paraffin, of small fish oil lamps in older houses, of a single tallow candle in the kitchen of a widow who has been up for an hour already without making a sound. Through one window, you can see a woman at a black-leaded range, lifting a kettle, setting it down, taking a heel of bread and a piece of smoked fish from a cupboard above her head. Through another, a man is pulling on a heavy blue jersey over a flannel shirt, his hair still flat from the pillow. Through a third, a small boy of perhaps 7, in nightshirt and bare feet, is standing in a doorway looking out at his father, who has just gone past with a long rope coiled over his shoulder. The boy is rubbing his eyes with the back of his hand. His mother comes up behind him, lifts him gently, and carries him back toward the warm fire. The air in the square smells of all the small things of this hour. Peat smoke, soft and brown, drifting from the squat chimneys. Coal smoke, sharper, from the houses that have moved on to coal in recent years. Wood smoke in one corner, where an old man has lit a small driftwood fire against the wall of his outhouse, for some reason he himself probably could not name. And underneath all of those, the salt. The salt is not strong, this far back from the water. It is only a thin, clean, cold note at the edge of every other smell, but it tells you, even with your eyes closed, that you are within 100 yards of the sea. Men are moving across the square. They come out of doorways slowly, one at a time, in 2s and 3s. Most are dressed in the same simple shape. Heavy dark trousers, a thick woolen jersey, sometimes called a gansey, knitted by a wife or a mother in a pattern particular to this village, sometimes to this single street. Above the jersey, a short oilskin coat, stiff with old wax, and a flat dark cap. On their feet, leather sea boots that come almost to the knee. Many carry a small wooden chest with a rope handle, which holds their food for the day. A few carry larger canvas bags. None of them are hurrying. There is no need. The boats will not leave for another hour. The greetings between them are short and quiet. A nod, a single word, sometimes only a small lift of the chin. They have known each other their whole lives. Many are cousins. Many have fathers, uncles, brothers, and sons in the same boat or in the boat at the next quay. There are families here in Fitty who have been fishing from this stretch of harbour for 6 or 7 generations. The names that appear and reappear in the church books by long record are Walker, Wood, Allen, Stephen, Cordiner, Cassie, Wisdom, Maine. They are names that the old people of Pictou County in Nova Scotia, by family tradition, will also recognize, because the same families, in the harder generations of the early 1800s, sent sons and daughters across the Atlantic, and the names took root there too. A cat slips out from a doorway, low and grey, with the patient walk of a cat that has lived its whole life among fishermen. It pauses in the center of the square, considers us with one long look, and then walks on toward the harbour, where it will spend the morning in the lee of a stack of fish boxes, waiting for whatever the cleaning gives it. From one of the cottages, a thin rising sound. It is the sound of a small handbell. A boy of perhaps 12, in cap and jersey, has come out into the square and is ringing it gently, walking slowly along the front of the houses. He is not loud. He does not need to be. The men he is calling are mostly awake. The bell is more a courtesy than a call, a soft reminder that the time has come, that the tide will not wait, that the kettles should be lifted off the ranges and the doors closed gently behind. He passes us, gives the bell two more soft shakes, and disappears between the houses toward the next square. Look up. Above the slate roofs, the sky is still completely dark. There are stars. There are the long, slow lights of a few ships out beyond the harbour mouth. There is very faintly a paleness above the eastern horizon, but only the kind of paleness that you cannot quite be sure of. That may be your eyes adjusting, that may be the first thinning of the night. The full dawn is still an hour and a half away. The men do not need the sun. They have done this work in the dark for so long that the dark is part of the work. Walk slowly with one of them now in your mind out of the square. He does not speak. He carries his small chest in one hand and his cap is pulled low. He passes the village's small mission hall, dark tonight, used by various accounts for prayers, weddings, funerals, and the occasional concert. He passes the corner where a few of the older boys have been chalk drawing on the wall during the afternoons. He turns toward the harbour. Behind him, the lamps in the cottages of Fitty are beginning to be turned down. The kettles have been moved off the heat. The children, where there are children, have been carried back to bed. The women who have to be at the curing yards in 2 hours' time will sit by their fires for a little longer, then put on their thick aprons and follow. For a moment, stay in the square as the men leave it. The lamps soften one by one until only 2 or 3 remain. A door closes quietly. A baby somewhere cries once and is hushed. The cat from earlier has not come back. The wind off the basin has dropped a fraction. The smell of peat hangs in the still air with the salt thin under it. Everything is in its place. The day has begun in Fitty the way it has begun for hundreds of mornings, in steady, unhurried, deeply known ways. Let your own breath slow. Let the small bell of the boy's hand be the soft note at the edge of your hearing. We will walk on in a little while toward the basin where the steam trawlers are waiting in the dark, with their funnels cold and their boilers being slowly fed. There is no rush. The tide will hold us. The village is up. All is well in the square at Fitty on this quiet October morning. All is well. It is 5:45 now, and we have walked slowly from the square at Fitty along the rough cobbles of the harbour road until we have come out at the long quay of the Albert Basin. The men we walked behind have gone aboard their vessels. The bell of the boy with his soft hand has stopped. The wind off the water is steadier here. It carries with it the full smell of the harbour all at once, in a way that no enclosed square could give you. Let the smell settle on you for a moment before we look at anything. There is salt, of course, there is fish. There is rope, the dry hempen smell of new coils on the quay. There is tar, deep and black and resinous, where a barrel of pitch has been opened against the side of a smacksman's shed. There is coal in small heaps along the wharf, and there is coal smoke, faint and grey, drifting from the funnels of 2 or 3 steam trawlers whose firemen have been at their boilers since 3 in the morning. There is very faintly the smell of frying. Somebody in a watchman's cabin on the South Quay has put a small pan of bacon on a stove, and the warm pork fat carries surprisingly far on the still air. The Albert Basin in 1893 is one of the working hearts of Aberdeen Harbour. It was opened, by various accounts, in the 1860s, cut out of the old tidal estuary by the slow, patient work of pick and shovel and steam dredge, lined with cut granite, and given gates that allow it to hold water at all states of the tide. It and the Victoria dock to its west are where the largest part of the town's fishing fleet now moors. Around its long sides, in the dim light, you can see the dark shapes of the vessels. There are perhaps 150 steam trawlers now operating out of Aberdeen, by the figures that men quote to each other in the pubs, and on a morning like this, a good third of them are tied up here. Look along the South Quay. You can see the line of them, dark hulls low in the water, single masts rising above the rails, square wheelhouses set aft of midships. Each one has a single tall funnel painted in the colours of its owner. Some are red with a black top, some are pale buff with a black band, some are plain black, weathered by long use. From two of the funnels, smoke is rising in a slow, steady column. From a third, only the faintest grey thread, where the fire has just been started. The boilers will take an hour to come properly to working pressure, and the skippers know it, and the firemen know it, and the day's whole shape is built around it. The steam trawler is still, in this year, a relatively new shape on the Aberdeen waterfront. The first of them, by long-told tradition in the town, was a vessel called the Toiler, brought across from the south in or around 1882 by a man called William Piper. She was a converted paddle tug, small by the standards of what we see now, but she carried a beam trawl and she could fish in weather that the old sail-driven smacks would not face. The men of the Aberdeen smack fleet, who had been pulling their nets from the deck of curve-bowed vessels under canvas for generations, watched her with a mixture of suspicion, contempt, and quiet calculation. Within a decade, the calculation had won. The town's owners began ordering trawlers in their 10s, then their 20s. By 1893, the trawler fleet has overtaken the sail fleet in number, in tonnage, and in landed value. A few of the old sailing smacks still work out of the basin further along, and we may look at them in a moment. But the steam trawler, with its wet black hull and its single tall stack, is the new shape of Aberdeen. Walk slowly along the quay. The granite under your feet is wet and worn smooth. Here and there a coiled rope lies neatly to one side, ready for casting off. A pile of empty wicker fish baskets is stacked against a bollard, their pale split wood ghostly in the half-light. A small iron hand truck stands abandoned with its handles up, where a porter left it last evening. The first lamplighters of the morning have not yet come through to extinguish the gas lamps along the quay edge, so the lamps are still on. They are old wrought iron standards, with thick glass globes, and their warm yellow flames flicker very slightly in the breeze. They throw small ovals of light on the cobbles, and between them deeper pools of dark. Pause at one trawler in particular. She is tied up bow out, ready to slip her lines in 20 minutes. Her name is painted in pale block letters on her counter. We do not need to know the name. There are dozens like her in this basin, each one named after a wife, a sister, a saint, a small town in the northeast, a daughter who died young, a virtue, or the simple word brave. She is perhaps 120 feet long, perhaps 130. She has a flush deck with low bulwarks. Forward of the wheelhouse, a heavy iron windlass is bolted to the deck, with the chain leading to the hawser hole. Aft of the wheelhouse, the trawl gear is laid out. The long beam, the heavy iron shoes, the dark folded mass of the net itself, ready to be shot once she clears the harbour bar. The firemen and the engineer are below. You cannot see them, but you can hear them. There is the small steady sound of a shovel scraping in the bunker, then the soft heavy chuff of coal being thrown into the open mouth of the furnace, then a faint hiss, as the wet coal meets the heat. The boiler is making its slow waking sounds. The pressure is climbing. The chief engineer, by the long custom of his trade, will be moving from gauge to gauge with a small lamp in his hand, checking each one, tapping each glass, listening, in the way an old country doctor listens to the chest of a long-known patient. On the deck, 4 men are working without urgency. The skipper is standing by the wheelhouse with his hands in his coat pockets, looking up at the sky, then down at the water, then along the line of the other boats. He is a man of perhaps 45, with a short grey beard and the broad weathered face of a man who has been on the deck of a fishing vessel since he was a boy of 11. The mate is checking the lashings on the trawl beam. The deckhand is uncoiling a rope and laying it down in a neat figure of 8. The cook, a thin man in a long apron, has just brought a mug of tea up to the skipper from the small galley below. The trawler will be away in 20 minutes. She will pass out through the lock at the inner end of the basin, down the long channel between the south breakwater and the north pier, and out across the harbour bar into the open sea. Her usual grounds, by various accounts, lie between 15 and 40 miles off, on the long banks east of the Butchan coast. The trip will last between 3 and 7 days, depending on the weather, the fishing, and the price the skipper hopes to get. White fish mostly, haddock, the great staple of Aberdeen, and cod and ling and turbot, and a steady catch of plaice on the right grounds. She will return with her holds packed in ice, the ice itself bought at a yard further up the harbour, and she will be unloaded at the lower fish market in the early hours of some morning later this week, before another batch of men reads the prices in the Aberdeen Free Press and decides whether to take her out again. For now she is still. The deck lamp throws a soft pool of yellow over the wheelhouse. The smoke from her funnel is rising more steadily. The skipper takes a slow sip of his tea, then nods very slightly to nobody in particular, the way a man does when a long-rehearsed thought has settled in him at last. The mate sees the nod, although it was not meant for him, and the work on the trawl beam goes on with a small added quietness, the way work does when it knows it is nearly finished. Step back from the quay edge. The basin lies black and almost flat. The lamps on the far side are small honey-coloured points across the dark water. 1 or 2 of the boats are slipping their lines now, the soft, small splash of a hawser dropping into the water, the brief turn of a screw under the stern, the slow, gentle move of 120 feet of trawler into the channel. Let your breath go long. The basin is waking. The fleet is leaving. There is no urgency in any of it. It is what they do. The town will keep going. The skipper has his tea. All is calm at the Albert Basin on this quiet October dawn. All is well. It is just on 7 o'clock now, and the eastern sky has at last begun to do what we suspected it might. The thin paleness we saw before has broadened into a slow, soft glow behind the dark roofs of the harbour buildings. The lamps along the quay are still burning, but they look smaller against the sky. The first long-fingered light is beginning to find the tops of the funnels and the upper rigging of the few sail smacks still in the basin. We have walked very slowly back along the south quay, past the warehouses with their tarred doors closed, past the chandler's shop with its windows full of coiled rope and brass shackles and lanterns and tarred line, past the boys who are setting out empty fish boxes in long rows for the morning's auction. and we have come, at last, to the great open shed of the lower fish market. The market is a long, low building, open on the basin side, with a sloping iron roof carried on cast iron columns. The floor is laid in stone sets, washed clean, although a thin slick of sea water and fish slime is already gathering along the gutters at the edges. The smell here is not unpleasant, although it is strong. It is the smell of cold, fresh fish, of ice that is still half frozen, of salt water, of wet sacking, of pipe tobacco from the men who are smoking by the pillars, and underneath, the faintest whisper of the breakfast, bacon that someone is still cooking on a small stove in the back of the auctioneer's office. The market is, by all the contemporary accounts, the very heart of the whitefish trade of the Northeast. It is here that the catches from the steam trawlers and the few remaining smacks come to be sold, every morning except Sunday, to the merchants and the curers and the railway men who will buy them, weigh them, pack them in straw and ice, and put them on the early trains for London and Manchester and Glasgow and Edinburgh. By 8 o'clock, the market will be roaring with the soft musical chant of the auctioneers. By 10 o'clock, the floor will be almost empty again, the fish gone, the buyers settling their accounts in the small offices along the back wall. For now, the market is not yet at its full pitch. It is in the slow, careful build of an hour before peak. Walk into the shed and stop in the middle of an aisle. Along both sides of the aisle, fish boxes have been set out. Each box, made of pale split pine, contains a single boat's catch or a portion of it. The fish lie in long rows, their pale bellies upward, their eyes still bright, their fins damp. Haddock dominate. They are the bred fish of Aberdeen, the catch every shore family knows the price of, the fish that will be smoked and split and sold all over Britain as the Finnan haddie, named by long tradition, for the village of Findon a few miles down the coast. There are cod in their own boxes, larger, paler, longer. There are skate, with their wide, flat bodies and curled-up wing tips. There are halibut, dark on top and pale below, sometimes as long as a small child. There are turbot, prized, less common, with their strange brown spotted backs. There are baskets of small flounder, and a heap of bright silver mackerel, and a few crates of lobster, dark blue and twitching slowly in the cold air. Moving among the boxes are the salesmen and the buyers. The salesmen wear long aprons of grey canvas, often stained black at the lower edge, and most have a stub of pencil behind their ear. They are the men whose families have been in the fish trade in Aberdeen for 1, 2, sometimes 3 generations, and they know every buyer in the shed by name and by old debt and by old kindness. The buyers wear darker coats, and many have a soft hat with a wide brim that they keep on against the cold of the open shed. Each buyer carries a small notebook in his palm. He moves from box to box, makes a small mark, mutters to himself, moves on. A few of the buyers are well known. There is the agent for one of the great London houses, a thin man with a long grey moustache, in a black coat that is a little too good for the floor he is standing on. He buys for a salmon and game shop in the West End, and his marks are followed closely by other buyers who reckon he knows what will sell at the high end. There is the buyer for the Manchester railway market, who deals in volume rather than quality, and whose marks always go on the haddock and the cod, never on the turbot. There is a small group of men who buy for the Aberdeen curing yards themselves, who will take herring and certain qualities of haddock back to the long wooden gutting troughs along the harbour, where the women will be ready for them within the hour. The auctioneer is climbing up onto the small wooden box at the head of the first aisle. He is a man of perhaps 55, in a heavy black overcoat and a soft hat, with a pencil and a piece of paper in his hand. He has been doing this work for 30 years. He has the steady, unhurried face of a man who has watched 100,000 fish bought and sold across this floor and has stopped being moved by any single sale. He clears his throat once, looks around, and then begins. The chant of an Aberdeen fish auctioneer is by old custom not loud. It is rapid, low, half musical, half chanted, with the prices threaded through it in a soft rolling burr that the practiced ear of the buyer can follow but a stranger cannot. A box is named. A first bid is murmured. Another bid follows. The pencil moves. The box is knocked down with a soft, brisk word, and the auctioneer is already 2 boxes further on. The buyers move with him in a slow shuffling tide, leaving the sold boxes behind them. Behind them again, the porters move in, lift the boxes onto barrows and small iron trucks, and wheel them out toward the railway carts that are already drawn up at the back of the shed. Stand for a little while at the side of an aisle. The chant goes past you, smooth and slow, like running water. The buyers nod and lift fingers and write. The porters slip between them with their barrows, calling softly, beg pardon, and the buyers step aside without looking, used to the rhythm. The fish in the boxes catch the new dawn light coming through the open side of the shed and shine pale silver and grey. Outside, on the basin, the first trawlers of the day are returning, slipping in past the south breakwater with their decks low under their catch, ready to add their own boxes to the floor for tomorrow morning. The market has been going since before anyone in the town now living was born. It will keep going long after this auctioneer has put down his pencil for the last time. It has its own slow, steady rhythm, and the rhythm carries everyone in it. Walk slowly out of the shed into the open. The sun is just lifting clear of the eastern horizon. The basin is silver. The funnels of the trawlers steam softly in the new light. A gull, the gull above the harbour breakwater, calls once, drifts in across the basin, lands on a piling and sits, with its yellow eye on the boxes of fish being wheeled out toward the carts. It will wait its turn by long custom. It has been a harbour gull all its life. Let your breath go slow. The market is humming, but it is humming low. The sun is up. The work is in hand. The trawlers are returning. The boys are stacking. The salesmen are chalking. The buyers are buying. The porters are wheeling. The auctioneer is chanting. Nobody is hurrying. Nobody is shouting. It is the soft, practiced, deeply known rhythm of 1,000 mornings just like this one. We will walk on in a little while toward the curing yards along the inner harbour, where the women have just arrived at the gutting troughs. There is no hurry. The market will sell every fish on its floor before 9. The fleet will go out and come back. The town will eat. The trains will carry the boxes south. All is well at the lower fish market in the new October light. All is well. It is 8:30, and the sun has climbed a little further. The shadows along the quay are still long, but they are clean shadows now, sharp-edged in the cold light, not the soft grey shapes of the half-dark. The lamps along the basin have been extinguished, one by an old man with a long brass pole. The market shed behind us is emptying, the last boxes wheeled out to the carts. We have walked on, past the harbour master's office with its blue-painted door, past a row of warehouses, and we have come to a long open yard along the inner harbour wall, where a different kind of work is in full slow swing. This is one of the fish-curing yards. There are, by various accounts, several dozen of them along the Aberdeen Harbour in this year, some large, some small, all working to the same broad pattern. They take the fish that has been bought by their merchants at the market or landed direct from the boats of the herring fleet at certain seasons, and they prepare it for the long market by salting, by smoking, by drying, or by packing in barrels. The fish that is eaten fresh in the city has gone by now to the railway. The fish that is going to keep, to be eaten in a week or in a month, in a kitchen in Glasgow or a parlour in Hamburg or a sailor's mess in the South Atlantic, is the fish that comes here. The yard we are standing in is laid out in a long open rectangle, paved in flat granite sets, with low stone walls along two sides and a row of wooden sheds along the third. In the centre, set up on stout wooden trestles, are the gutting troughs. They are long shallow boxes of dark wood, lined with a thin layer of lead, with a low wall down the centre and a slow steady trickle of clean salt water running through them from a tap at the upper end. They are arranged in rows of 3, and along each side of each trough, 3 or 4 women stand at work. These women are the gutters. They are called, by the old name still in use along this coast, the herring lasses, although today the boxes beside them hold haddock and codling rather than the silver darlings of the summer herring season. In the height of summer, this same yard will be crowded with the great herring crews who follow the boats down from Lerwick through Wick and Peterhead to Yarmouth. 3 women to a crew, working from dawn until late evening on the open quay. Today in October, the herring season is over for the year. The great fleets have moved south, and the work is steadier, slower, less spectacular, although no less skilled. Watch the women for a little while. There are perhaps 30 of them at work in this single yard. They are dressed in long, heavy skirts, with strong canvas aprons tied across the front, and over the aprons, second, smaller aprons of waxed cloth that catch the worst of the wet. Their sleeves are rolled up above the elbow. Their hair is bound up under tight cotton kerchiefs in patterns of small white-on-blue dots, or red-on-black, or plain white. Their fingers are bound, each one in strips of clean cotton called clouties or clouty strips, wound carefully around the joints to protect the skin from the salt and from the slip of the gutting knife. Even with the cloths, by the end of the summer season, most of them have cuts on their hands that take weeks to heal. Today, in the cooler month, the cuts are fewer, but the cloths are still wrapped. The knife each woman uses is small, dark-handled, kept very sharp, and called by the workers a futtle. It is held loosely in the right hand, sometimes the left. The fish is taken in the other hand from the box at the woman's hip. The cut comes in one smooth motion across the belly. The offal is slipped into a wooden tub between the workers. The cleaned fish is flicked, with a small precise gesture, into the trough where the running salt water carries it clean. From there, another worker, a younger girl in some yards, an older woman in others, lifts the fish out, lays it on a wooden board, and sorts it by size. Beyond her, two more workers pack the sorted fish into wooden barrels, with layers of dry salt between them, ready for the cooper to head and the merchant to mark. The work is hard, but it is not frantic. It is the smooth, practiced work of women who have been doing this since they were 14, who have followed the herring fleets up and down the east coast for 15 or 20 seasons, who have stood at troughs like this in Lerwick in May, in Wick in June, in Fraserburgh in July, in Yarmouth in October. Many of them know the women working beside them from a dozen seasons. Many of them are sisters, cousins, in-laws. Several speak Gaelic among themselves, brought from the Lewis and the Hebrides, where by various accounts the recruitment of herring crews has long been a thread of the small island economy. Several speak the broad Doric of the Aberdeenshire coast, with its hard consonants and its open vowels. In the corner of the yard, one older woman is humming a slow Lewis air in a low private voice that the others let her have. A young girl walks the length of the yard with a great kettle of hot tea and a tray of thick wedges of bread spread with dripping. She stops at each pair of troughs, and the women pause, wipe their hands on the apron, and take a mug and a wedge. They eat standing. They drink standing. There are no chairs. They have been on their feet since 7, and they will be on their feet until 5, with a short pause at noon for a proper bite. Their backs ache. Their fingers ache. They will lie down sore in the evening and sleep without difficulty. But listen while you watch. There is talk. The women talk steadily as they work, in a soft, easy way, never loud, often interrupted by the swift, small movements of the knife and the flick of the cleaned fish. They talk about a wedding in Peterhead the week before last. They talk about a man's boat that came in too short of crew. They talk about a coat that needs mending, a child who has a sore throat, a minister at the kirk in Footdy who, by general agreement, has a kind face but a long sermon. They talk about an aunt in Cape Breton who has not written in a year, and another woman across the trough nods slowly and says she has not heard from her cousin in Pictou since the summer either. The diaspora is in the air of this yard in a way it is not, perhaps, in the streets of the upper town. The herring lasses and the fishwives of the northeast have known emigration for generations. Brothers who sailed for Halifax in 1838. Sisters whose daughters went on the assisted passage ships to Nova Scotia in the 1850s. Whole families who left the village of Cullen or Portsea or Banff in the lean years that came at the end of the 1840s and made farms in the woods of Cape Breton. The contemporary record suggests that the heaviest waves of emigration from the northeast to maritime Canada are by now a generation or two in the past, but the connections are still living. Letters cross the Atlantic by the steam mail. Photographs come back of stiff-collared men in front of clapboard houses, of young women with their hair in the same Aberdeenshire way standing on porches in Antigonish. The yard works on around its quiet talk. The barrels fill. The coopers in the wooden sheds along the back wall hammer their hoops with a slow, soft, even rhythm. The smell here in the open air is sharp and clean, the smell of cold fish and salt and a little hard-packed straw, not the cloying smell of a closed curing house. A breeze off the basin lifts the corner of an apron, drops it again. A gull lands on the wall at the head of the yard, considers the proceedings, decides that nothing will be left for it, and flies off again. Stand to one side, out of the way, and let the work continue around you. Nobody is paying any attention to us. We are only watching. The futtles flash. The fish slip into the troughs. The salt water carries them clean. The packers pack. The coopers hammer. The herring lasses talk and drink their tea. The diaspora is named in passing, then set aside. Another barrel is closed. Another is started. Let your shoulders go heavy. Let your jaw unclench. The yard is full of slow, practiced hands. The work is in good order. The fish is being saved for the long winter. The barrels will travel. The letters will be answered. All is well at the curing yard on this clear October morning. All is well. It is 11 o'clock in the morning now, and the day has settled into its steady working pitch. The sun is high enough to put a clean, cold light on the granite walls of the warehouses. The wind off the basin has dropped further. A small mist that lingered along the inner harbour at dawn has burned off, and the water is a calm slate grey, broken by the slow wakes of two small ferry boats crisscrossing between the wharves. We have walked slowly away from the curing yard, back along the inner harbour, and turned south. In front of us now rises the long, graceful arc of the Victoria Bridge. The bridge was opened, by various accounts, in the 1880s, after years of campaigning by the people of Torry on the far bank, who until then could reach the city only by ferry. It is a steel girder bridge on stone piers, painted dark green in this year, with a footway on each side and an iron rail on which the gulls of the harbour like to sit when the tide is low. Step onto the bridge. The walk across is not long, perhaps 3 or 4 minutes at the easy pace we are keeping. The footway is paved in close-laid stone sets, and the iron rail under your hand is cold and smooth, with the soft layer of paint that comes from years of wind off the sea. Pause in the center of the bridge. From here, you can see the whole shape of the harbour. To the east, the harbour mouth opens between the two great stone breakwaters, the south pier on this side, the north pier on the city side, with a small white lighthouse at the head of each. Between them, the open North Sea, grey-green this morning under the high sun, with a few small fishing boats working in close to the shore, and the long, pale curve of the Aberdeen sands stretching away to the north toward the village of Bridge of Don. To the west, behind us, the basins and the wharves spread out in their long granite shapes. The Albert Basin, where we stood at dawn, lies dark and crowded with the morning's trawlers. Beyond it, the Victoria Dock, with its higher walls, holds the larger merchant steamers, 2 or 3 of them in just now, their funnels striped in the colours of the houses that own them, the Aberdeen Direct Line for the Cape of Good Hope, the Aberdeen White Star Line for Australia, and one steamer of the North of Scotland Line that runs between Aberdeen and the islands. Above the docks, the city rises in its long grey terraces. Aberdeen is, by all the contemporary accounts, a town built almost entirely of granite. The local stone is hard, slightly silver, full of small bright flecks of mica, and on a morning like this one, with the sun bright and the air clean, the whole upper town shines a soft, pale grey silver, as if it had been built out of frozen rain. The towers of the old town are visible above the rooflines. The Crown of King's College in Old Aberdeen, away to the north. The spire of the town and county hall in the centre. The tower of the citadel at the seaward end of the castle gate. Closer to us, the long ribbon of Union Street, the great granite spine of the modern town, climbs slowly westward toward the green hill of Robert Gordon's. We will look more closely at the upper town in a little while. For now, turn and look at the south bank. Torry, in 1893, is a community in the middle of a long change. It was, until perhaps the 1870s, a small old fishing village of perhaps 150 cottages along the south side of the harbour mouth, a place of fishers and pilots and ferrymen, separate from the city by both water and custom. With the building of the bridge, and with the rapid growth of the steam trawler fleet, the population has grown sharply. New tenements have gone up along Sinclair Road and Crombie Road. New curing yards and smokehouses have opened along the South Esplanade. A new parish church, the Torry Parish Church, has been built. A school has opened. The old village core at the foot of the cliffs below the battery is now ringed by the new 4-story blocks of the modern industrial harbour. Walk off the bridge onto the south side. The street here is broader than the streets of Fitty. There is more light. The houses are taller, in pale grey granite like the upper town. A baker's shop on the corner has its windows full of soft brown loaves, with a sign in the window for tea and a cake at 3 halfpence. A small boy in a school uniform of dark serge, with his cap askew, is hurrying back to a doorway with a paper-wrapped loaf in his hands. Turn left along the South Esplanade toward the cliff and the older village. The road here climbs gently. To your left, the harbour opens out below you. To your right, behind the high garden walls of small grey houses, you can see the kyle yards and the washing greens of the village. A line of washing has been hung out to dry along a single long rope between 2 stone pillars, sheets and shirts, and a small woolen jersey flapping gently in the harbour wind. The same kind of jersey we saw on the boys at Fitty this morning. A woman is at her door, leaning on the lintel, with a mug of tea in her hand. She is perhaps 50. Her hair is grey and bound up under a clean white kerchief. Her apron is the same dark canvas apron of the curing yards, but it is dry now and clean. She has done her morning at one of the yards, and she has come home for the noon hour, and she has put the kettle on, and she is standing for a little while in her own doorway looking out at the harbour she has looked at her whole life. She nods to us, although we are only shadows to her, and we nod back and walk on. Further along, the road climbs more steeply, and we come to a small open space at the foot of the cliff. Here, set back from the road, are the older cottages of Torry village. They are low, hulled, with steep slate roofs, much like the cottages of Fitty on the other side. There are perhaps a dozen of them in this quiet corner, and most are still lived in by the families who built them or by their descendants. An old fisherman in a heavy navy coat is sitting on a wooden bench outside one of them, mending a length of net spread across his knee. He works slowly. A small grey cat is asleep at his feet. He does not look up as we pass. He is too deep in the small, careful pattern of his work to notice us. Above the cottages, the cliff rises. At its top stands a square stone building, the old battery, dating from the Napoleonic Wars, when the harbour mouth was fortified against the French. The guns have long since been removed. The battery itself is by various accounts used now as a Coast Guard station and a powder store. Above it, the green grass of the cliff edge runs away to the south. A pair of figures are walking up there, a man and a woman, far enough off to be small black shapes against the sky. They are out for an October morning walk before lunch. They will look down at the harbour and the long ships in their basins and the bridge and the city across the water, and then they will turn and walk back to their grey terrace and their fire. Stand for a moment longer at the foot of the cliff. The harbour lies below us in its full bright morning. The bridge is busy with carts going one way and an empty lorry going the other. A coal cart with two dark horses is climbing the slope at the south esplanade. The trawlers in the basin have settled into their daytime quiet, their boilers low, their crews ashore. The gulls are wheeling slowly above the masts. Somewhere a single ship's whistle gives one short call, then is silent. Let your breath go long. The bridge is steady. The cottages are warm. The fisherman is mending. The cat is sleeping. The walkers on the cliff are small and unhurried. The whole shape of the harbour is laid out for us in its slow, deeply known order. We will turn and walk back across the bridge in a little while toward the upper town, and we will see the granite streets in their full sun. There is no rush. Aberdeen has been here a very long time. All is well at Torry on this clear October mid-morning. All is well. It is 12:30 now, and we have walked back across the bridge, along the inner harbour, up through the small streets of the lower town, and out at last into the wide open space of the castle gate. We are standing at what has been, for centuries, the heart of Aberdeen. The castle gate is a long, broad street, almost a small square, that opens out at the very top of the harbourside slope in the old original heart of the town. To the west, it narrows into the long granite ribbon of Union Street, the great straight 19th century thoroughfare that runs for a mile across the natural slope of the city, carried partly on a bridge over the old Denburn Valley. To the east, it falls away toward the docks and the sea. To the north, it gives onto the old streets of Broad Street, School Hill, and the Gallowgate. To the south, it climbs slightly toward the Justice Port and the old harbour roads. In the centre of the castle gate stands the Mercat Cross. It is a small octagonal pavilion of grey stone, raised on a low stepped base, with a tall central shaft topped by a unicorn. By tradition, the cross was put up in or around 1686, although it stands on the same patch of ground where a market cross has stood since the medieval town first held its weekly market. The panels around the octagonal base are carved with the portraits of the Stuart kings, from James I of Scotland down to James VII, although the centuries have softened the carving in places, and several of the faces are blurred almost to oval blanks. Walk slowly toward the cross. The paving here is laid in close-fitting sets of pale grey granite, swept clean every morning by the town's road sweepers, slick now from the morning's foot traffic, but still showing clean lines between the stones. The buildings around the square are 3 and 4 stories high, all in the same grey granite, with sash windows in regular ranks, parapet roofs, and small wrought iron balconies on a few of the upper floors. Look at the buildings for a moment. They are typical of the better Aberdeen of this period. The street level is given over almost entirely to shops, with tall plate glass windows behind which, in this hour, you can see the lit displays of the day. There is a draper, with bolts of dark woolen cloth arranged in a stepped pyramid in the window, and above them, on small hooks, sample squares of tweed in browns and greens, and a soft grey-blue. There is a tobacconist, with rows of dark briar pipes laid out on red velvet, and tall glass jars of yellow shag and dark Virginia cured in long twists. There is a watchmaker, with a small brass plate by the door and a window of pocket watches on white silk, and behind the counter, in his apron with his loop pushed up onto his forehead, the watchmaker himself, bent over the back of an open case. There is a baker, with the high warm shape of newly made bread piled in the window, and a small dish of butter and a thick slate showing the morning's prices in chalk. At the corner where the castle gate begins to narrow into Union Street, there is the new town and county hall, built, by various accounts, in the 1860s in a heavy ornate style, with a tall clock tower that carries the time across half the city. The clock shows just on 12:35. As we look at it, the great bell strikes once, a clear deep single note marking the half-hour. The sound rolls across the castle gate, down toward the harbour, away along Union Street. Pigeons rise from the ledges of the building, circle once, settle again. The street is busy without being crowded. This is the noon hour, when the clerks and the lawyers and the merchants of the upper town come out of their offices for a half-hour of fresh air and a quick lunch at one of the many small chop houses and tea rooms along the central streets. A small group of 3 young clerks in dark suits and bowler hats is walking in step toward a tea room on the south side of the square. They are talking quietly among themselves about a price, about a colleague's wedding, about a song they heard at the music hall on Friday evening. They pass a delivery boy with a wicker basket on his head, full of bread, and the boy steps aside without breaking his stride. A tramcar is coming up Union Street from the west. It is one of the horse-drawn cars that still run on the main lines in this year. Aberdeen will get its electric trams a few years on, by the early years of the new century, but for now, the old open-topped horse cars are still the daily transport of the central streets. This one is drawn by 2 heavy bay horses, with red leather harness and gleaming brass fittings. The conductor stands at the rear platform in a dark blue uniform with brass buttons holding the leather strap. The car has perhaps 10 passengers on its upper deck and a dozen more on the lower. It comes to a smooth halt at the stand near the cross. 2 passengers step down, 3 step up. The conductor pulls the bell. The horses lean into their harness. The car moves off again, with the soft, regular clop of hooves and the iron rumble of the wheels on the granite sets. Walk on toward the entrance of Union Street. The street is wider here than almost any street in Britain at this date, and it runs in a straight line, west by northwest, for nearly a mile. It is, by various accounts, one of the great engineering projects of early 19th century Scotland. To carry it across the natural slope of the city, the engineers built a great arched bridge, the Union Bridge, over what had been the Denburn Valley. From the bridge you can look down into the small public gardens that have been laid out below in the old valley, with their formal beds, their bandstand, their gravel paths. Today, in October, the flower beds are largely empty, but a few late chrysanthemums are still in bloom along the bandstand walk, in dusty red and gold. Union Street itself is lined on both sides with the great granite frontages of Victorian commerce. There is the Northern Assurance Building, with its tall pilastered front. There is the Aberdeen Savings Bank, with its solid square clock above the door. There is the printer and stationer who supplies the offices of the upper town, with a window full of fountain pens and bottles of ink in royal blue and oxblood red. There is the bookshop, where by long custom, the local clergymen come on a Tuesday afternoon to look over the new theology and the historical novels and the slim volumes of poetry that arrive from Edinburgh and London. At the bookshop window, an old man in a dark coat is standing reading a title through the glass. He is the kind of man you see often in the streets of Upper Aberdeen at this hour. He has the broad weather-tanned face of a seaman, but he wears a good dark coat and a soft hat, and his hands, behind his back, are clean. He may be a retired captain of one of the Aberdeen Line steamers. He may be a master mariner who has come ashore at last, after a long career, to live with a married daughter on Bonaccord Street. He may be the brother of a fisherman from Fitty who went to sea in a different way and has come back into a different life. Whatever the long shape of his story, he is now, on this October noon, simply a man in a coat looking at a book in a window in the soft, cold sunshine of his home city. Stand at his shoulder for a moment, although he does not see us. The bookshop window holds a row of small green-bound volumes of Walter Scott, a heavy brown-bound atlas, a slim red-bound book of Scottish ballads. He is looking at the ballads. He smiles very faintly at something he reads in the spine, then turns slowly and walks on toward the corner. The Castle Gate clock strikes the quarter. The Aberdeen sun, low even at noon at this latitude in October, lays a long pale light along the granite. The pigeons settle, the tram bells ring far off. The clerks come out of the tea-room buttoning their coats. Let your breath go long. The upper town is wide and clean and orderly. The work of the harbour is far below. The streets here run by the timetables of clocks and trams and shop doors, and the rhythm is unhurried. It is a town that has been at this trade, in this stone, with these clocks and these tea-rooms and these granite frontages, for the better part of a century. We will walk on, in a little while, away from the central streets, toward the offices where the harbour news is gathered, and then back toward the water. There is no hurry. The Castle Gate has stood through hundreds of October noons. All is well at the cross, in the cold, bright sunshine. All is well. It is 2 o'clock now, and we have walked slowly back down the slope from the upper town, away from the bright granite of Union Street, past the small streets of warehouses and chandlers' shops, until we have come once more to the edge of the harbour. Here, on the inner quay of the Victoria dock, in a low square building of dark stone with a slate roof and a small bell turret on top, stands the office of the harbour master. We will not go in. The harbour office is private business, but we can stand on the quay outside it for a little while and watch what passes, and let our breath slow against the long, steady rhythms of a working port at the middle of its day. The Aberdeen Harbour in 1893 is a place of many trades. The trawler fleet we saw at dawn is only one of them. There is also the long-distance shipping trade, which carries the granite of the Aberdeen quarries out to the world, and which brings back in return the timber of the Baltic, the coal of the Tyne, the iron of South Wales, the grain of the Black Sea, the wine of Portugal, and the salt fish of Newfoundland. There is the coastal trade, the small steamers and the few remaining sailing schooners that run up and down the east coast of Scotland and England, putting in at Wick, Lerwick, Newcastle, Hull, London. There is the regular passenger service of the North of Scotland line that runs between Aberdeen and the islands of Orkney and Shetland. There is the cattle trade, the small vessels that carry beef on the hoof to the markets of Leith and London. There is the emigrant trade, although it is much reduced from its mid-century peak, in which a passage can still be booked to Halifax or Quebec or Sydney by way of agents in the offices along Marischal Street. All of these come together at the office on whose quay we are now standing. There is a long polished brass plate by the door. There is a small wooden notice board on the wall to one side, behind a glass case, on which the day's shipping movements are chalked up in a neat clerk's hand. We can stand in front of the notice board and read it slowly, with the cold sun on our backs and the gulls calling above the basin. The board is divided into 3 columns. The first column shows vessels in port. There are listed this afternoon perhaps 20 vessels. A steamer of the Aberdeen Direct Line, the Inchcape, in from Cape Town, discharging at the Pochra Quay. A small Norwegian timber bark, the Helga, in from Bergen, discharging deals at the Inner Basin. A coastal steamer, the Aberdonian, in from Newcastle, discharging coal at the south side. A Danish schooner, in for repair at one of the small yards. 2 trawlers of the local fleet, in for new boiler tubes. Half a dozen sail smacks of the inshore fleet between voyages, and a handful of vessels in for the small everyday business of any port. The second column shows vessels expected. There is the steamer St. Sunniva of the North of Scotland Line, expected this evening from Lerwick. There is the steamer Hardanger of the Norwegian timber trade, expected tomorrow morning. There is a London steamer expected on Friday. The third column shows vessels sailed. A long list, this column, of departures from the morning's tide. Trawlers mostly, coasters. The Inchcape's outward sailing for Plymouth on Thursday. A small list of names and times in the neat clerk's hand. 3 or 4 men are standing in front of the board with us, all of them looking up at it carefully. They are merchants mostly, in dark coats and soft hats, with their hands in their coat pockets, reading the day's news of their trade. One is the agent for a London grain house, waiting on the arrival of a Black Sea steamer that is not, on this board, expected yet. He frowns very slightly at the absence, then turns up the collar of his coat against the cold and walks on. Another is a young clerk from a shipping office along the quay, sent to copy the board for his employer. He has a small leather notebook open against his chest and a pencil, and he is copying the columns into it with the small, swift hand of a man who has done this duty every afternoon for 2 years and could nearly do it without looking. Beside the harbour office, on a small bench against the wall, 2 older men are sitting. They are not in the working clothes of seamen, although both have the unmistakable bearing of men who have spent decades on the deck of a ship. They wear good dark coats and soft caps. They have, between them on the bench, a copy of the Aberdeen Free Press, folded open at the shipping page. They have been reading it slowly, sharing a single pair of spectacles, exchanging soft comment in a Doric so broad that even close to them, it is hard for the uninitiated ear to catch every word. The Aberdeen Free Press is, in this year, one of the 2 great daily papers of the city, alongside the Aberdeen Daily Journal. It has its offices on Union Street, with a printing works behind. It carries the local news, the council debates, the shipping intelligence, the prices at the lower fish market and the cattle market, the church notices, the deaths and the marriages and the births, and the brief telegraphic news from the rest of the world. By long custom, every shop, every tea room, every tavern in the harbour streets keeps a copy on a table for the use of the customers. The two old men with the shared spectacles have brought their own copy with them this afternoon, because they have a long-standing habit of reading it together in the open air. They are not in any hurry. They are reading the shipping page item by item. One reads aloud in a low, slow voice. The Inchcape from Cape Town arrived yesterday. The other nods. He knew her master once on the Australian run. The Helga from Bergen arrived yesterday. The other nods. He has bought timber from her owners, the Aberdonian from Newcastle. He nods, a regular caller. St. Sunniva expected this evening from Lerwick. Both nod. They have been on her once, 10 years ago, on a passage to Kirkwall for the funeral of an uncle. They come by their talk to the column of arrivals and departures from the steam trawler fleet. They read the names slowly. A trawler in from her grounds with 170 boxes of haddock. A good fishing. The first old man whistles softly with approval. Another trawler in with a poor catch, only 60 boxes. The other man shakes his head very slightly. A third, the Doric, has not been heard from since Saturday. The two old men pause on that name. They do not say anything for a moment. One takes the spectacles off and rubs his eyes with the back of his hand. The other looks out across the basin, at the empty water where the Doric, if she were in, would be tied up at the inner quay. The sea has not always been kind to the Aberdeen fleet. By the long records, by the kirkyard stones at Footdee and Torry and Newhills and Skene, every generation has lost vessels. The steam trawlers, for all their power, are not exempt. Within the lifetime of every old man on this bench, boats have been lost. Crews have not come home. Widows have stood at the harbour wall in the long late autumn evenings looking out to sea for the small grey shape that will not now be there. The two old men know this. They do not say it here this afternoon. They simply pause on the name of the Doric, and the silence between them is the only acknowledgement she will get on this bench in this hour. After a moment, the first old man takes the spectacles back, opens them, fits them carefully over his ears, and reads on. The second nods slowly. They will mention the Doric tomorrow, perhaps, when she is still not in, and the day after. By the end of the week, if she has not come back, her name will move to a different page of the paper, and the kindness of the town will fold itself, quietly and without spectacle, around the families in Fitty or Torry or Newhills who lived for her arrival. That is for later. For now, we will simply stand near them and not look at them too long and let them have their reading. The gull above the breakwater calls once. The shadows on the quay are lengthening already, although it is not yet 3. The notice board catches the slow westering light. The harbour office bell strikes one soft note. Let your breath go long. The day is in good order. The board is up. The newspaper is shared. The fleet is mostly home. The Doric will come or the town will hold her. Either way, the harbour continues. All is well at the office on the inner quay in the cool October afternoon. All is well. It is just on 5 o'clock now, and the autumn afternoon has begun its long, slow turn into evening. The sun is low and reddish gold over the western roofs. The clear, hard light of midday has softened to a warmer, kinder shade. The gulls are flying inland, away from the harbour, to their evening roosts on the green grass beyond Torry Battery and along the dunes of the Aberdeen sands. We have walked slowly away from the harbour office, up the narrow streets of Marischal Street, past the small shipping agents and the chandlers, past a quiet tobacconist where the proprietor is closing the shutters of his front window. We have come at last to the great open building of the joint station, the railway terminus that serves the city. The joint station was opened, by various accounts, in or around 1867, on the site of the older terminus of the Aberdeen Railway Company. It is called the joint station because it is shared by the lines coming in from the north and from the south, the great north of Scotland and the Caledonian, which meet here under a single great glass andiron roof. The structure is a long open hall, with platforms on either side and the through lines running down the middle, the whole covered by a low arched roof of iron ribs and small panes of dirty glass. Step into the hall. The light here is different from the light of the open street. The high glass roof filters the late sun into a pale yellow haze. The smoke and steam of the engines hang in soft layers under the arches, lit from above by the long bars of sun, and they shift and reform as each engine slowly exhales. The air smells of coal smoke, of warm engine oil, of steam, of bookstall paper, of cheap leather suitcases, of a man's pipe tobacco, and faintly of the chestnuts roasting on the small brazier of a street vendor who has set up just inside the south doorway. The platforms are busy without being thick. This is the hour when the late afternoon trains for the south are loading, and the inner suburban trains for Stonehaven and Banchory are coming and going at short intervals, and the long mail train for Edinburgh and the south is being made up at the longest platform. We will walk along the platforms slowly and look at the trains. On the second platform stands the 4 o'clock for Inverurie and Huntly, just departed, a small tank-engine train of perhaps 4 coaches, painted in the dark green of the Great North. Its tail lamps are receding into the cutting at the north end of the station, with 2 small red points of light against the darker grey of the cut walls. On the third platform stands a long express, dark green coaches with cream upper panels, ready for departure at 5:30 for Stonehaven, Montrose, Dundee, and Edinburgh. The engine at the head is a large 4-coupled passenger engine, by the look of her, in the dark green of the Caledonian line, with a great brass nameplate on the splasher of her driving wheel that we are too far away to read. Steam is leaking softly from her cylinders. Her driver, a man of perhaps 40 in a stained blue coat and a soft cap, is standing on the footplate with his hand on the regulator, looking back along the train. His fireman is shoveling, with a slow, steady rhythm, the long, heavy throw of a man who has another 2 hours of it ahead. The passengers are climbing aboard. A middle-aged gentleman in a long grey coat, with a leather portmanteau, takes a corner seat in a first-class compartment, settles himself, takes out a small book bound in dark cloth, and opens it. A young couple, perhaps newly married, perhaps not, climb into a second-class compartment with two large carpet bags. The woman wears a dark green traveling coat and a small round hat with a single brown feather. The man helps her up the step, then climbs in himself, and they settle by the window. Further along, in the third-class compartments, the passengers are more numerous and more various. A group of three young men in working clothes, with cloth bags between their knees, on their way perhaps to a laboring job further south. Two older women in dark shawls, with a basket of provisions on the seat between them, going down to visit family in Montrose by the look of their quiet talk. A single sailor in his blue uniform, a small canvas bag in his lap, going south to join a ship at Leith. A young man of perhaps 20, in a long dark coat with a small leather suitcase at his feet, sitting very still, his hands clasped in his lap, looking out of the window. He is traveling alone. His suitcase, by its sticker, is marked for the steamer to Halifax by way of Glasgow and Greenock. We will not look at him for long. The records of this period suggest that the heaviest waves of emigration from Aberdeen to maritime Canada were already a generation or more behind, but a steady trickle of young men and women is still leaving every month for the long crossing. Some go to join family already settled. Some go simply for the work. The town does not weep for them as it did in the harder generations. It says goodbye to them at the station, takes their farewell letter home to the family kitchen in Fitty or Torry or Banff, and trusts the post and the telegraph to keep some thread between them. The young man at the window does not see us. He is looking out at the platform, at the passing porters with their luggage trolleys, at the lights coming on along the iron ribs of the roof above him, with the quiet, thoughtful face of a man who knows that he is about to step away from one shape of life and into another. There is no fear in his face. There is no excitement. There is only the long, quiet looking out of someone who is, perhaps, saying his last small private farewell to the country in which he was born. A mother and two small children come along the platform, holding hands, looking for him. The mother is, by her face, perhaps 50. The children are perhaps 8 and 10. They reach the door of his compartment. The mother does not climb in. She speaks to him through the open window, very softly, in a Doric so broad that we, at this small distance, can only catch the cadence of it. She holds his hand through the window. The children stand close to her skirt. She speaks for a while. He nods several times. The bell rings. The guard further down the platform lifts his whistle. The mother kisses her son on the forehead through the window, the way a mother does when she will not have many more chances. The bell rings again. The whistle blows 2 short blasts, then a long one. The engine answers with a deep, slow exhalation of steam. The brakes release with a soft hiss. The driver opens his regulator. The first slow chuff comes from the funnel, and then another, faster, faster, until the locomotive has caught her rhythm, and the long train of coaches begins to slide slowly out of the station and into the cutting. The mother stands at the platform edge with her hand raised. The children on either side of her wave. The young man waves back from the window of his compartment. The train, with its tail lamps lit, goes through the cutting, around the long curve, and is gone. The mother stands for a moment longer with her hand still half raised. Then she lets it fall. She turns. She takes a child by each hand. The children look up at her. She nods once, and they walk slowly back along the platform toward the southern doorway. They will go home to a kitchen in Fitty, perhaps, and they will put the kettle on, and they will sit by the fire. The boy will get to Glasgow tonight, and the steamer for Halifax tomorrow, and a letter back by some week in November by way of a portside agent. The town has known this rhythm for generations. It is not new. Let your breath go long. The lamps along the platform are warm. The next train is being made up at the far end. The chestnut vendor at the south door is stirring his brazier. The bookstall keeper is sorting his evening papers. A porter is wheeling a long trolley of mail bags toward the brake van of the next departure. The day is folding gently into the evening. The young man is on his way. The mother is on her way home. The trains will come and go. The harbour will go on. All is well at the joint station in the soft yellow light of October dusk. All is well. It is 7 o'clock in the evening, and we have walked slowly away from the joint station, back down the slope of the city, through the early lit streets of the lower town, along the harbour road where the gas lamps have all been turned on, and we have come, at last, back to the small square in Footdy where we began our long day. The square is darker than it was at dawn. The lamps in the cottages are warm and steady. The wind has dropped further, and the air is still, with the long, cool stillness of an October night that has not yet decided to be cold. The salt is back, the same thin, clean note we noticed this morning. The peat smoke is back, in slow, soft layers along the slate roofs. Through the windows of the cottages around us, you can see the soft yellow lamplight of kitchens at their evening hour. We will not knock at any door. The families of Fitty do not need us, but we will stand in the square for a while and let our gaze move from window to window and listen to the small, quiet sounds of an October evening in a working fishing village. Through the window of one cottage, you can see a kitchen. It is small, low-ceilinged, with whitewashed walls and a black iron range against the back wall. A long table stands in the center of the room, covered with a clean, dark cloth. 5 places are set, with plain stoneware plates and pewter mugs and a single thick wax candle in the middle. At the head of the table, a man in his shirt sleeves and a heavy knitted waistcoat. At his right hand, a woman, his wife, in a clean apron over a plain dark dress. On the bench along the side of the table, 3 children of perhaps 12, 9, and 5. The father is the man we saw this morning, going past with a long rope coiled over his shoulder. He came home at midday, when his trawler tied up at the Albert Basin after her short overnight working, and he slept for 3 hours through the afternoon, and now he is at his table for the evening meal. His face is weathered, but it is open, gentle, the face of a man at rest. His hair is still damp from the small basin of water in which he washed before sitting down. The wife is at the range, lifting a heavy iron pot. She brings it to the table, sets it down on a thick folded cloth, lifts the lid. The smell that rises is the smell of a Footdy evening. It is the smell of a thick fish soup, made with the heads and tails and trimmings of the day's haddock, with lakes and barley and a few floury potatoes from a small garden in the back lane. It is plain, but it is hot, and there is plenty of it. The wife ladles it into the bowls with a steady, patient hand. The children watch quietly, with their hands folded in their laps, as their mother passes the bowls round. The father takes the heel of a brown loaf from a wooden board in the center of the table, breaks it carefully into pieces, and lays a piece by each bowl. The father bows his head. The children bow their heads. The mother stands by the table, her hand on the back of her chair, and bows her head. The father says a grace very softly in a slow Doric voice, asking the Lord's blessing on the food and on those who have brought it home and on those who are still at sea. We cannot catch every word through the window, but we catch the shape of it. The grace is short. It ends with a soft Amen. The children, in three soft small voices, say Amen with him. The mother sits. The father takes his spoon. The eating begins slowly in the easy quiet of a family at its evening table. This is the heart of life in Fitty, in this year, and for a long span of years on either side. The work is hard. The pay is uncertain. The boats are dangerous, but the kitchen at the evening hour is warm. The wife is at her table. The children are at their bench. The father is home from the morning's fishing. The soup is hot. The grace has been said. The lamp burns steadily. The peat in the small grate by the chimney is glowing red. Everything that the long day has required of the people in this room is, for these hours, set down. Walk a few steps along the square and look in at another window. In this kitchen, the family is smaller. There is only a widow, perhaps in her 60s, and a single young woman, perhaps her unmarried daughter or her granddaughter, sitting across from her at a small square table. The widow is in a black dress and a white kerchief. The young woman is in a plain grey dress, with her hair brushed back into a single braid. Between them on the table is a plate of bread and butter, a pot of jam, and 2 cups of tea. The widow is reading aloud slowly from a small black book. It is, by its shape and the soft thin paper, a Bible. The young woman is listening with her hands in her lap and her head a little inclined. The lamp on the table is small and warm. The widow's husband is, by the long custom of these cottages, dead, perhaps for many years, perhaps for only 1 or 2. The young woman is, by her quiet attention, dear to her. They have between them their tea and their reading and their lamp, and their small black-leaded range with its red fire. The night will close around them, and the cottage will hold them, and they will go to bed at 9. Walk further, look in at a third window. In this kitchen, the family is large. There are perhaps 8 people around the table, 3 generations, a grandfather at one end in a heavy knitted gansey, a grandmother at the other in a black dress and a clean apron, 2 sons of perhaps 30 and 28, both home from the boats, the wife of the elder son, 3 small children. The conversation around this table is louder than at the first cottage. It is not loud, but it is more lively. The 2 brothers are talking about the price of haddock at the morning market. The wife is laughing softly at something the youngest child has said. The grandmother is putting more bread on a wooden board. The grandfather is listening, very content, with a clay pipe lit in his hand. This kitchen has, in its time, lost. The contemporary record suggests that no fishing family in Fitty has come through 3 generations without loss. The grandfather has lost a brother to the sea many years ago by some account. The grandmother has lost a son in the 1870s by family tradition. The wife has lost a sister to a fever that went through the harbour the winter she was 8. None of that is in the room tonight. The kitchen is warm. The supper is on the table. The brothers are home from the boats. The pipe is glowing. The children are well. The losses are remembered certainly in the long evening of any winter, but they are not at the table tonight. Step back to the center of the square. The square at this hour is dark and almost silent. Above us, the stars are coming out, hard and clear in the cold autumn air. A single late lamp burns in the small mission hall on the far side. Somewhere along the row, a fiddle is being played very softly by a young man who has been at it for an hour and is not yet ready to put it down. The tune is slow, an old strathspey, the kind of tune that has been played in this village for 100 years and will be played, perhaps, for another 100. In each cottage now, the evening is settling. The bowls are being cleared. The kettles are being lifted off. The Bibles are being closed. The pipes are being knocked out against the grate. The smallest children are being lifted, sleeping, and carried through to the box beds in the inner room. The lamps are being turned down, one by one, although a few will still burn for an hour, for a wife who has a piece of mending to finish, or a man who has a letter to write. Let your breath go long, the square has settled. The fishing families of Fitty are at their tables, the grace has been said. The lamp is warm, the fire is red, the fiddle is gentle. The losses are held lightly tonight, the boats are tied up. We will walk on in a little while out toward the harbour wall, where the watchmen are at their slow, patient evening work. There is no rush. The square has been like this on 1,000 October evenings. All is well in the kitchens of Fitty. All is well. It is 9 o'clock now. The night has come down on Aberdeen, soft and clear, with no moon yet showing above the eastern horizon. The lamps along the upper town are warm in the windows. The streets of Union Street and the Castle Gate are quieter than they were at noon, with only the occasional cab clopping past, the occasional small party of late diners walking back to a terrace in Bon Accord or Albin Place. Down here on the harbour, the working day has ended. The lower fish market is closed. The curing yards are dark and empty, with the troughs washed clean and the doors locked. The chandlers' shops are shuttered. The harbour office is closed, although a single light burns in an upper window where, by long custom, the night clerk sits over the books and the telegrams. We have walked slowly from the square at Fitty, along the long quay of the Albert Basin, around the inner corner, and we have come to a small round building of dark granite at the head of the basin. This is the round house. It is, by various accounts, the watch house of the harbour, a small circular tower of 2 stories with a low slate roof, a single chimney, and a doorway facing east toward the harbour entrance. The roundhouse has stood here, by long record, since the early years of the century. It was built for the harbour watch, the small body of men who, by ancient custom, keep an eye on the harbour through the night. In this year, the watch is a small one, perhaps 3 or 4 men on duty at any time, working in shifts. They keep an eye on the ships at their moorings, walk the quays at intervals, check the lamps along the piers, log the arrivals and departures, and when a ship comes in late at night, signal her berth and make sure her lines are properly fast. We will stand by the door of the round house for a little while, but we will not go in. The door is half open. A warm, soft light shines from within. The fire in the small grate is crackling gently. A kettle is on the hob. 3 men are seated around a heavy oak table in the center of the small round room. The oldest of them is perhaps 60. He is the senior watchman of this shift. He has been on the Aberdeen Harbour watch for 30 years, since he came ashore at last from a long career on the Aberdeen Line clippers to Australia. He wears a heavy navy coat and a soft cap, and he has a long-stemmed clay pipe in his teeth which he draws on slowly and with much pleasure. His face is broad and weathered. His hands are clean. The second man is perhaps 40. He is the assistant watchman. He has come into the harbour service after a shorter career as a mate on a coastal steamer that ran between Aberdeen and Leith. He has a thin, dark moustache and an easy manner. He is reading a copy of the evening edition of the Aberdeen Daily Journal, folded across his knee. The third man is perhaps 22. He is the youngest of the watch, learning the trade. He is the grandson of the senior watchman, by various accounts, brought into the service this year. He has a thin, clean face and bright, pale eyes. He is sitting upright on his bench, looking at the older men with the quiet attention of a young man who knows he has a long apprenticeship in front of him. On the table between them is a large brown teapot, a tin of biscuits, a small black ledger book in which the night's movements will be logged, an oil lamp with a clean, polished chimney, and a long brass spyglass. On the wall behind the senior watchman, on a heavy iron hook, hangs a coil of fine signal halyard. On the wall opposite, in a square wooden case behind glass, a row of small painted signal flags, in their proper order, ready for use at any moment of any night. The talk in the roundhouse is soft. The senior watchman is telling a long, slow story about a passage to Melbourne in or around 1873, on a clipper that lost her main yard in a heavy gale off the Cape. He has told this story 100 times. The assistant watchman has heard it 100 times. The young man has heard it 8 or 9 times in the months he has been on the watch, and he listens to it now with the polite attention of a young man who knows that the stories are part of the trade. The senior watchman does not require any response. He tells the story slowly, with long pauses, while his clay pipe glows softly between sentences. At intervals, one of the men gets up, takes the lamp, and goes out to walk the quay. The young one is sent first, with a soft instruction from his grandfather to go as far as the head of the basin, check the lights, and come back. He nods, takes the lamp, lifts the latch of the door, and steps out into the night. Walk with him very gently in your mind. The quay is dark, but the lamps along its edge are lit in their cast-iron standards with their thick glass globes. The young watchman walks slowly along the line of them, with his lamp held a little forward, checking the flame in each. One has a smoking flame that needs a small turn of the wick. He stops, opens the small brass door at the base of the lamp, makes the adjustment with a practiced flick of his thumb, and goes on. At the head of the basin, the trawlers lie at their moorings, dark shapes in long rows. Their decks are empty. Their boilers are cold. Their lamps are out, although here and there a single small white riding light burns on the rigging of one of the bigger vessels by the regulations of the port. The water between them is black, with the soft small reflections of the quay lamps lying on it in long broken lines. The young watchman walks to the end of the inner quay, looks out, makes a small mark in a small notebook he carries, and turns back. He passes a stack of empty fish boxes. He passes a coil of rope. He passes the gull of the morning, asleep now on the same piling on which she sat at dawn, her head tucked under her wing, perfectly still. He smiles, a small private smile, to see her there. He has come to know the gulls of the basin by sight, in the way the harbour men do. He comes back to the round house. He hangs the lamp on its hook. The senior watchman, between two sentences of his Melbourne story, nods slightly to acknowledge the return. The assistant watchman looks up from his newspaper, smiles, says nothing. The kettle on the hob has come to the boil. The young watchman takes it off, pours the water into the brown teapot, and stirs slowly with a thin wooden spoon. He sets the lid back. He brings the pot to the table. He fetches 3 clean mugs from the small shelf above the door. He pours. The senior watchman takes his mug in both hands, blows softly across the top, lifts it, drinks. The assistant watchman takes his. The young man takes his. They sit quietly for a little while, drinking their tea, with the fire crackling and the lamp burning steady. The ledger book on the table is, at this hour, almost empty. There has not been a single arrival or departure since the last entry, which was the inward call of a small coaster from Leith at 6 in the evening. The next expected arrival is the St. Sunniva from Lerwick, due about midnight, with the mails and the passengers from the Northern Isles. The night will pass slowly. The watch will walk the quay every hour. The kettle will be put back on. The Melbourne story will end and another will begin. The St. Sunniva will come in toward midnight, with her green and red lights showing first as small points beyond the south breakwater, then growing as she steams up the channel, then turning as she comes alongside the inner berth, and the watchmen will go out in their coats to take her lines. For now the roundhouse is warm, the harbour is quiet, the fleet is tied up, the watch is in good hands, let your breath go long, the trawlers are asleep, the gulls are asleep, the young watchman is at his tea, the old man is at his story, the fire is red, the lamp is steady, all is well at the roundhouse on this clear October night, all is well. It is 11 o'clock at night now. The last lights of the upper town have, for the most part, been turned down. The trams have stopped running. The tea rooms are dark. The castle gate is empty, with only the lamps along its broad pavement still burning. The clock on the town and county hall has struck the hour, 11 long deep notes that rolled across the city and down toward the harbour and out across the basin and away to the breakwaters at the mouth. We have walked slowly away from the roundhouse, along the south quay, past the dark trawlers in their long sleeping rows, past the harbour office with its single upper light, past the warehouses and the chandlers' sheds and the small dark mission for sailors. We have come, at the last, to the long arm of the south breakwater that runs out into the sea from the south side of the harbour mouth. The breakwater is a great work of granite. It was built, by various accounts, in the early decades of the century, with much expansion and rebuilding in the 1870s and 80s. It rises perhaps 15 feet above the high-water mark, with a flat paved walkway on its top and a great curved stone parapet on its seaward side. It runs out for several hundred yards into the open water, and at its very end, on a small platform, rises the small white tower of the South Breakwater Light. Walk slowly along the breakwater. The walkway is wide enough for 2 to walk abreast. The granite under your feet is wet, although it has not rained, with the slow, constant film of sea spray that the wind off the open water lays on every horizontal surface. The parapet on your seaward side is high enough to rest a hand on, smooth and worn. with the curved top scored by 100 years of the row pens and gaffs of fishermen leaning on it. The sea on the outer side is dark. The tide is at the half. The water lifts and falls in long, quiet swells against the lower stones of the breakwater, with the soft, regular sigh of the swell breaking and drawing back. There is no wind tonight to speak of. The waves are not breaking against the parapet. They are only sighing against the lower steps, in a long, slow, easy rhythm that comes from far out and is going on whether anyone is here to listen or not. Look out to the east, beyond the harbour mouth. The open North Sea stretches away in the dark. There are stars overhead, the late October stars, hard and clear in a cold sky without cloud. The constellations of the autumn are up. The square of Pegasus high in the southeast. The W of Cassiopeia overhead. The long, faint stream of the Milky Way running down to the east, lying low along the horizon, where, on a clear hour like this, you can almost see the faint glow of light on the water from the stars themselves. There is a moon, the late October moon, just rising over the horizon to the east, a soft red-gold half-moon climbing slowly above the sea. By midnight she will be well up, and her light will lie on the water in a long broken silver path from the harbour mouth out to the horizon. For now, she is small and reddish and very low. The fishing boats out on their grounds will see her rise from their decks. The keepers of the Buchan Ness Light, away to the north along the coast, will see her rise from their tower. The South Breakwater Light is just behind us. It is a small white round tower of perhaps 30 feet in height, with a single window in the lantern at the top, and inside the lantern a soft, constant brightness that swings, slowly and patiently, on its long, slow turn. The light is, by the contemporary record, a small one as lights go, fixed and white when seen from the proper bearing, designed mainly to mark the head of the breakwater for the vessels making the harbour. Stand for a little while at the head of the breakwater, with the small white tower behind you and the open sea in front, and the lights of the fishing fleet far off on the horizon. You can see them now, out in the dark, 15 or 20 miles off. There are perhaps a dozen small white lights, very small, very faint, almost like the stars but slower in their motion. Each one is the masthead light of a vessel. Some are the trawlers that left the Albert Basin at dawn, working their grounds on the long banks east of the Buchan coast. Some are the few remaining sail smacks of the inshore fleet, working closer in. Some are the lights of the small fleet of drifters from Peterhead and Fraserburgh, on their long quiet drift through the autumn night. By the long custom of the Aberdeen fleet, the men out there are working the trawl, or shooting the lines, or hauling, or sleeping in their bunks, by turns. The skippers are watching the weather. The cooks are making tea. The boys are coiling rope. The chief engineers are checking their boilers. The whole fleet of perhaps 150 Aberdeen vessels is at its work somewhere out on the long dark water, doing the same patient, unhurried, deeply known job that men have been doing on these grounds for centuries. In 3 or 4 days, the boats that left at dawn this morning will come back, one by one, slipping in past the South Breakwater with their decks low under the catch, their holds packed with haddock and cod and ling and ice, their crews tired but content, their lights showing first as small points on the horizon and growing as they steam up the channel. The fish market will open before dawn. The boxes will be set out. The auctioneer will climb onto his little wooden stand. The chant will begin. The buyers will buy. The trains will carry the boxes south. The yards will work. The kitchens will hum. The town will eat. None of that needs to happen tonight. Tonight the boats are still out. The town is asleep. The breakwater is empty. The light is turning. Let your breath go long. Look down very slowly at the water under the lower stones of the breakwater. It is black and slow. It moves with the long swell. Small particles in the water catch, here and there, the faintest light from the lamp at the head of the breakwater, and you can see, if you look carefully, tiny soft blue-green sparks where the swell breaks against the stones. The cold luminescence that the sea sometimes shows on a calm autumn night when the right small creatures are in the water. They sparkle for a moment very faintly, then go out, then sparkle again in a slightly different place. The sea is full of slow, patient lights tonight of its own. Look up again. The fishing fleet is still there in its line of small white points along the horizon. The Saint Sunniva, by the clock now, must be near the harbour mouth, coming up from the south after her long passage from Lerwick. In a few minutes you will see her green and red sidelights coming up the channel. The watch will go out from the round house to take her lines. Her passengers, tired from a day at sea, will come down the gangway. The mailbags will be lifted onto the railway carts for the southern train tomorrow morning. The long, deep rhythm of the harbour will hold all of it, the Aberdeen rhythm. The granite under our feet, the slow swell against the lower stones, the steady, patient turn of the small white light at the head of the breakwater, the lit windows of the cottages at Fitty, far back behind us, the widow with her Bible, the grandfather with his pipe, the young watchman with his lamp, the skipper on the deck of his trawler far out in the dark, taking a cup of tea from the cook. The mother walking home from the joint station with her 2 children, who is, by this hour, sitting by her fire and saying a small silent goodbye to her son on the steamer for Glasgow. The old men on the bench at the harbour office, who will read the Free Press again tomorrow afternoon and find, perhaps, that the Doric has come in, or perhaps that she has not, and either way will hold what they read in the long, slow kindness of a town that has known the sea all its life. The whole long day we have walked through is here, in this one quiet stretch of granite at the mouth of the harbour. The pre-dawn lamps at Fitty, the trawlers slipping their moorings, the auctioneer's slow chant, the herring lasses at their troughs, the bridge over to Torry, the granite streets of the upper town, the shipping board on the inner quay, the mother and son at the platform window, the fishing family at their evening meal, the watchman at their tea, the young man with his lamp. It is all here around you in the cool October night, with the moon rising and the stars hard and the sea sighing against the stones. None of it needs anything from you. You have only been walking with us, listening, breathing slowly. Let your eyes close if they have not already closed. Let your breath go heavy. Let the long, slow turn of the small white light be the soft mark at the edge of your hearing. The town is asleep. The fleet is out. The watch is on. The breakwater is patient. The sea is patient. The night is long. Stay with it for as long as you wish on the south breakwater of Aberdeen Harbour in or around the middle of October in the year 1893. All the good and quiet work of the long day is in. The town is in good hands. The lighthouse keeps its slow turn. Sleep well. All is well at the harbour mouth. All is well. That is where we will leave it for tonight. The story is finished, but the night is not, so let this play on for as long as it helps. If Tartan Lullaby has been good company, you are welcome to subscribe so the next episode finds you. There is no rush. If you would like to see the landscape that goes with these stories, the art prints are at Tartan Lullaby Art on Etsy. Mood boards and stills are on Pinterest under the same name. The links are in the description below the video. Next week, we travel somewhere new. Until then, thank you for listening and sleep well.